World Economic Forum at Davos. We've been talking about the BRIC countries for a long time. That's going to be the future. The emerging markets are going to take over the world, and the BRIC countries in particular are going to dominate the global economy. That's been the buzz here at Davos and elsewhere for many years now. Now, over the last few months, people have started to question that. Is that really the way it's going to pan out? Are the BRIC countries actually starting to slow down? Is it possible that some of the developed countries actually are going to continue to maintain their lead, and that's never ever going to get eroded? And also, the BRIC acronym by itself, does that really make sense, or should we be shuffling that around in some interesting way, putting some other countries in and changing others around? So that's going to be the subject of debate today, avoiding the BRIC wall. And we have an absolutely fantastic panel from all parts of the world, really, to help us understand this. And it gives me great pleasure to start off by welcoming Mr. Victor Chu, who's the Chairman and the Chief Executive Officer at First Eastern Investment Group at Hong Kong. Great to get your perspective out there. Sitting next to him, Mr. Gita Wirjawan, who's the Minister of Trade for Indonesia, one of the countries that people feel might come in there. I've heard people saying that India should go and Indonesia should come in, but you know, whether that happens or not, maybe we can find some other way of sneaking Indonesia into that. But it's great to have you with us. Juliet Labelle, it's a great privilege to have you with us. She's the chair of Transparency International. We've seen so much talk about corruption in the BRIC countries and elsewhere, and that is being seen as one of the factors that could cause them to slow down. So it'll be great to get your perspective. You are, of course, also the co-chair of the World Economic Forum, so it's a privilege to have you with us. Mr. Anand Sharma, it's wonderful to have you back with us here at the NDTV WEF debate. Now, last year when you were here, there was a sense of great doom and despair about India, not least because there'd been a flip-flop in multi-brand retail and FDI and multi-brand retail. Now, you've been able to get that through in the months since then, and you've been the person who's championed that, so we're going to get some of your stories from there. And Klaus Kleifeld, it's great to have you with us as the Chairman and the CEO of Alcoa. You are represented in many of these countries, but perhaps you could also get a developed country view into this as well. Sure. And of course, a great audience whom we will turn to shortly. Now, this particular debate is empowered in a sense by the NDTV Second Screen app, which we have been talking to many of you about. If you've got the NDTV app, open up Second Screen. You can tell us which questions you want to ask. Vote questions up and down, and I promise I will be taking your questions. So the top voted questions will get asked by me right here. Can I just start off by getting your essential perspective, though? The BRIC countries, are they heading for a wall?
No, I think the BRIC country is thriving. I think the BRIC country have given inspirations to other emerging markets to step up their efforts to come onto our league. There's now another grouping called MINT, Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. So I think that some competition.
There's all sorts of interesting acronyms out there.
Yes, and the BRIC country have to look over their shoulder, make sure that we are always on the cutting edge of innovation and differentiation.
Well, there is something wrong with the global story when we cannot separate the BRIC from the world. What has happened in Europe and Americas has adversely impacted the growth in all the countries, but at the same time, we have been the driving engines of global economic growth and recovery, even after 2008-9. We are talking of a grouping of emerging economies or developing countries which have account for 40% of the population of the world, 30% of the landmass of the world, almost 28% of the gas reserves, 12% of oil reserves, 45% of coal reserves, 40% reserves of gold and hard currency, and rich human resources, where for decades and decades high growth will be the pattern. And the countries which are investing in institution building, countries which are assimilating high-end technologies, which are investing in innovation, and I'm sure that irrespective of what percentage points you lose, though it matters to us, the policy framers, to the societies, because we need a high GDP growth for obvious reasons. But we will continue to be there, will continue to matter. One thing I would like to dispel is this impression that we are going to overtake. No, it's a natural rebalancing of the global economy. How can you have 50% accounting for very little for the global trade or the global GDP. Today, in PPP terms, it's almost 26% of the global GDP, 20% of the world trade. And in real terms, with combined GDP close to 14 trillion US dollars, we are accounting for 19.82% of the global GDP. So we have to bear these factors in mind. Now, are we going to disappear or are we going to hit the wall? Certainly not.
Okay. Gita, if I could just ask you, these countries, that acronym came up from somewhere, and then South Africa got added and it became BRICS. Now, there are others who will say that the same stories, the same themes, the same concept of emerging countries are playing out elsewhere as well, Indonesia being one example.
Right. I mean, well, Indonesia hasn't had the honor of joining the famous acronym, but there have been other acronyms, such as what you've mentioned, CIVETS and MIST. We're somewhat misty because Indonesia is the eye in the mist, while, you know, Mexico, South Korea, and Turkey and all that. I don't disagree with Anand in that I think we're beyond a shadow of a doubt. The BRICS are, you know, far away from any signs of hitting anything. By whatever yardstick Anand has mentioned, you know, the BRIC countries representing 30 to 45% of just about anything of the world. I think it's a question of, are we likely to get used to a deceleration of growth? And it is much more of a global story as opposed to a BRIC story. Now, does Indonesia aspire to be a member of BRIC? We're not into aspiring to be a member of anything if we don't deserve to be a member of anything. But what we can tell the world is that I think Indonesia has remained somewhat unscathed from the externalities that we've seen in the last 4 years by way of the configuration of the economic structure. And we have been maintaining a robust investment thesis, very robust domestic consumption, which I think some of the BRIC countries could be learning. We're seeing China actually consciously trying to reconfigure its economic structure as to increase the propensity to consume domestically. And I think the Brazils, the Indias, the Russias, and the South Africas of the world are fully capable of adapting. And what makes them capable is not just the human resource and the innovative capacity, but it's the fiscal space. The fiscal space of all the BRIC countries, I think, is much better than some of the European countries and the US that we've seen.
Even countries running pretty high fiscal deficits, as in the case of India.
Oh yeah, but well below 190% of Greece. You know, that's the reality.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily a comparison that's going to be comforting.
It is a comparison. It is a comparison. I don't think it's anywhere from imminently hitting a wall. Okay. But I think they've got the ability to be adaptable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you look at the world and when you're looking at it from the United States, there was a perception I used to sometimes pick up in Davos 3 or 4 years ago, and I used to think it was slightly premature that, you know, the United States is over. Europe finished. And it's all going to shut down. It's all going to be about India and China and the BRICS countries. Was that slightly overhyped at that time? And now the demise of the BRICS, is that also being overhyped?
I would say, in a good American way, hold your horses before you declare somebody dead, right? So I think, I mean, let's start with the BRICS and then go to the existing markets in the U.S. I mean, I actually am very positive on what I would call the emerging markets. I always thought that the acronym BRICS was good for one purpose, to point the attention of people that were looking at where's the world going to the emerging markets and singled out those ones that obviously are first to play an important role. But I always thought that what was put into the BRICS, I mean, each country has a very unique and specific dynamic, and other than little marketing concept, I mean, didn't have that much in common, right? Everyone has their own different challenges that are not identical, right? But I'm very optimistic on the emerging markets, and therefore the discussion whether Indonesia is in or out, you know, I don't think that matters that much for a businessman. What matters is where can I do good business, right? And where's the environment good? Those type of things are clear. I mean, we can talk about that. On the U.S., I think the U.S. has so many things going for them, and now one thing that nobody ever thought of, and now one thing that nobody ever thought of would be possible, the new gift called shale gas, you know, which I would call the biggest invention after oil refining, right? That's coming in now and totally changing the dynamics of competitiveness of the U.S. in addition to the attractiveness for a talented workforce. I mean, it's still the country that is most sought after as an immigration country. You've seen the immigration reforms that are underway. I believe that they are going to happen in the second administration with Obama. And then you have places like Silicon Valley or around Boston. I mean, large centers of innovation that are very hard to replicate.
Right. You made a very interesting point about the fact that there are major differences between the BRIC countries, and that's something which I want to touch upon in slightly greater detail. But some of the problems that they share are also common, and you at Transparency International have been really concerned about the levels of corruption, and we've been seeing in BRIC country after BRIC country and across the emerging world, that's become a really major issue.
Absolutely, and of course it's a major issue because, one, it's the fact that all the resources that could be used for the development of these countries can be siphoned off in terms of stolen assets, in terms of bribery by individuals, in terms of tax evasion, you know, to name a few. So that's one aspect. The other one is that these countries have very high young population. India, I think something like 66% of the population is below 30 or the like. And so these young people, I think, can be very idealistic, which is wonderful, and have high expectations in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability, but so do investors. And they do expect more. So, of course, some of these countries have a lot of natural resources, Russia being number one in terms of gas, China in terms of rare metals, and so that you are producers, but at the same time you have a tremendous need for natural resources from other countries. And many of these resources are in Latin America or in Africa right now. So the way that the BRIC countries and other emerging countries work in these other countries in relation to their transparency, in relation to their compliance with strong codes of ethics, in relation to working with the communities where they are, as well as the national governments, will really dictate how successful they are, because over time, some of these countries, or the people of these countries, if they see that these resources are not exploited in a responsible way, will say, wait, we don't want you here. So you do think that corruption has been holding these countries back and continues to hold them back from realizing their full potential? I think the big hazard with corruption in these countries will be social destabilization, will be investors looking the other way, will be loss of resources. And these countries, as well as many other countries, if not all around the world, what you find is that corruption is a political currency. But when the people see that after elections, that it's business as usual, that the right legislation has not been passed or enforced. So they become very cynical. And it's a question of trust. Trust by the people, but also trust by the outside world on these countries. Mr. Sharma, we did see a major upsurge in the last 1 year in India on the question of corruption, and a lot of awareness has come about that problem. Is this a signal that things are changing as the new generation comes up? India, countries like India are very aspirational societies. You will try and get rid of some of the excesses in the wrong things of the past.
Let me put it straight. Corruption has existed in countries and societies for long, whether in developed economies, whether in America, in Europe, in Asia. To single out. Secondly, do we have institutions in place to address the challenge of corruption? The answer, I'll say, for India is a firm yes. You have an elected parliament which is accountable to the people, a government which is accountable to legislature. You have an overactive, pardon my saying so, media, which is always busy 24/7. I have no objection. You have an assertive judiciary. You have a vigilant society. It's not only the right to vote which the citizens have. It is this very government the presently in office, which has given the right to information, empowering the citizen, which was a right available only to elected legislatures. Today we have the whistleblowers bill, we have transparency, we have accountability. If allegations have been made, investigations have been held, and people holding high offices have gone to prison. But only focusing on this one area, that this is holding us back, then why countries have moved to negative growth zones? Why countries, rich and developed economies, are not growing? The larger issues which we have, what was said by you earlier and by Huguet, is very much relevant. That yes, we have different patterns. China is a big manufacturing power, major exporting country. We are not a major exporting country, but we are one of the global leaders in the services sector. Brazil is an agricultural superpower. They also have natural resources which are enormous. Same is the case with South Africa or the African continent. And same is the case when it comes to Russia, with the largest landmass, with their freshwater reserves, their mineral reserves, precious metals. So we are, I agree with her, with Huguet, how we engage with other parts of the world, including with Indonesia. It's not where you are part of BRICS or not. But let me say one thing which is very much relevant here, that together we are, whether it is China, India, we are part of the East Asia Summit, where Indonesia is integral to ASEAN process. And so we have groupings which... not only that, bilaterally we have regional arrangements, and East Asia Summit now has moved forward with America and Russia also joining in. We have launched the RCEP at the last summit, that the regional cooperation for economic partnership. So it's not that we are looking only at ourselves, or our growth is at the cost of any other region of the world. As I use the word rightly so,
fair enough,
it is a rebalancing, because you cannot look at the world as it existed in 20th century or 19th century. Then you have to go back to 16th century where we were.
Right.